Unzip Mind podcast. My name is Nick Smith. I'm here with Greg Minikis and Dylan Jessen.
Hello.
Hello, and we have a special guest today.
Very special guest.
We have JaneA Kelley with us.
Hi, everybody. Thanks.
Welcome.
Thanks for coming on.
I'm glad to be here.
Did I say your name right, JaneA?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Sweet. So we're really happy to have JaneA on the podcast. They reached out to us after we got started, and we're going to talk about a couple really cool, interesting topics. One particularly heavier than others. We're going to be talking about bipolar 2 and sort of the differences between bipolar 1 and 2. And then we're going to be talking about pet therapy also.
Can you just kind of introduce yourself a little bit and kind of what you do and why we kind of started having contact with you?
So, my name is JaneA Kelley. I am a writer, an educator, and a mental health advocate. I come to my mental health advocacy because of my own lived experience with the mental health system. And I think it's really important for people who have the privilege of being quote unquote out about having mental illnesses to step up and speak for, to be a voice for those who can't.
Right.
Like, for example, like I'm out at work, like my boss knows that I have bipolar disorder and she's been really supportive, and I've been in companies that are not that supportive. So I feel really fortunate with that. So, and I am originally from Maine. I moved to Seattle in 2013, and I share my home with two lovely cats, Belladonna and Tara. They're one's a black cat, one's a tuxedo cat, and they're both about 11 years old.
I love that. And where in Maine?
Basically, kind of up and down the coast, like Belfast, Ellsworth, Rockland, Portland. So kind of adjacent to, but not quite in the main tourist destinations.
Yeah, I'm a New Hampshire boy. So yeah, I'm a fellow East Coaster.
New Englanders.
Yeah, New Englanders out here. We out here on the PNW. We moving.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we are so happy to have you on, and it has been a while coming.
Yeah.
Like Greg was saying, we started talking with you and trying to get you on for a while now.
Yeah.
Near the beginning.
Yeah, near the beginning. And I'm just, what you have to bring to the table and to discuss, I think your story is amazing. And what you found as like your therapeutic outlet is really, really cool. And I'm excited to be able to share that.
Yeah.
And
So relatable.
Yeah. And bring it into the community.
We've had clinicians on who have, expertise to talk about mental illness, but we haven't had anyone on with that lived experience. And part of the reason why I wanted to have you on, because A, you have that lived experience, and B, the video that you sent where you talked about your experience, I just thought you were really eloquent. I think you're very well spoken, and so I think you're an ideal person to talk about, for instance, bipolar 2, because you have that experience, and I think you're going to be really good at communicating it.
Thank you.
There was one thing I want to say. You both come from New England. I don't know sort of what the state of stigma about mental illness is like over there, but I feel very grateful that I live in the Pacific Northwest, because there was a lot of awareness about mental illness, and the fact that you have a boss who supports you, who's aware that you have a chronic mental illness, and is supportive, is like really beautiful and inspiring. And there's, I think, more of that in the Pacific Northwest than there might be in other parts of the country or the world.
Oh, I would absolutely agree with that, because there is a lot of stigma. I mean, when I was living in Maine, I perceived a lot of stigma around mental illness and a lot of judging of mental illnesses as character flaws rather than honest to God disabilities, and workplaces that were not willing to accommodate for any disability, especially mental illness. So,
Right.
Yeah.
so it is much better for me as like a person with a day job out here, because I have and there's better access to mental health care here, and the health insurance I have is much better than any health insurance I ever had in Maine. So it makes care a lot more accessible for me.
Good.
And I know that that's a privilege. So
it's also something like this. That's a sort of state of affairs that like I want that to be more common. Like I want to advocate for that being like this should be the status quo, that you can get access to healthcare and that you have supportive bosses and stuff.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I mean, if I could change the American healthcare system for both mental health and
Yeah.
physical health,
Please.
if I could snap my fingers and make it humane, I would do it in a hot second.
Yeah. I think we all agree with you on that. So let's get into it. Let's start with maybe the heavier topic. We'll talk about bipolar 2. So can you start by just telling me, from your knowledge, your experience, what is the difference between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2, and how might people get confused?
Well, first of all, bipolar 1 features episodes of mania and depression, whereas bipolar 2 features episodes of hypomania and depression. And so where a full-on mania is pretty obvious when you see it happening.
Yeah.
It's like you can pretty much tell when a person is manic. Hypomanic is not so easy to see because hypomania typically manifests itself in ways that are capitalism friendly, like excessive productivity, and they also kind of, and because the hypomania allows, I would say, like for me, most of my mania symptoms were more silent symptoms like overspending and maybe like making a foolish personal decision like I'm going to buy all variations of my name as domain names, and of course I can afford the like $500 a month it'll cost to make that happen, but so it's mostly like for me it was the overspending and the um agitation a little bit, the inability to sleep and get good rest. Definitely more subtle because, like I said, when I'm in a hypomanic episode, I could walk down the street and go to the grocery store and nobody would know. But like if you are manic, it's really hard it's really hard to hide that because even the most clueless person will be like, what's up with them?
Yeah. We three have dealt extensively with people in severe manic episodes. You can tell just by somebody's face, right? Just the look on their face.
Yeah. How they're speaking and whatnot. It's like it's in their tones. It's in like their rapid speech. When you're in a hypomanic phase, right? Do you have a sense of that? Can you feel it within yourself? And is it frustrating for you to know where you are and then not be able to have is it easier or more frustrating for you to not have a presentation of your mania?
I think I mean, for me, I find the experience of hypomania to be really frustrating. And that's what bothers me when people are like, oh, hypomania must be so much fun. I'm like, well, yeah, not so much. I mean, if you want to sit there in traffic and swear at the other drivers and then like go home and read about some conspiracy theories and, you know, buy a $300 jacket. I mean, it is frustrating because people don't see that as hypomania. They see it as a character flaw. They see like, they don't say JaneA's in a hypomanic phase of their illness. They say JaneA doesn't know how to control her spending. JaneA has an attitude problem. Yeah, so yeah, the hypomania tends to be that more judged as a character flaw than full-on mania.
That's a good place to start, where we're talking about, if we're going to be talking about the sort of misconceptions that people have about hypomania. I think many people, it's common in the pop culture. Many people have heard about, manic depressive. They've heard about bipolar. They have some idea of what mania looks like. Extremely rapid speech, extremely labile emotions, high level of activity. Like you can see it just the way somebody's moving, just the way their eyes are flicking back and forth while you're talking to them. Whereas hypomania is more subtle. It might look like someone who's just very energetic or a little emotionally volatile. And so what you found is that clinicians as well, they're not realizing that you're hypomanic and it's being misdiagnosed, or is it mostly just other people who are seeing it as a character flaw?
Well, I would say that for some time, the clinicians were misdiagnosing bipolar 2, and that's actually something that's pretty common because generally when a person with bipolar 2 presents for counseling, they're presenting with depression. So their condition gets treated as depression. They get medications as if they're depressed, and antidepressants can have um, antidepressants can be bad for people with bipolar disorder if they're not combined with mood stabilizers, because they can actually induce mania or hypomania.
Oh, wow.
Was that your experience with it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. When I was first diagnosed with depression, I was about 30 years old, I guess. And I finally started taking antidepressants after my therapist was like, you call your doctor and get on antidepressants, or I'm having you involuntarily hospitalized. I was like, well, when you put it that way, I don't see how I can possibly refuse.
So that's not just a misdiagnosis. That is like a forced prescription of a medication. Like, you didn't go asking for an antidepressant. You were given the choice between an involuntary commitment, which can be, we work in that environment. It can be very difficult and traumatic for someone to be in that kind of environment, or just taking the meds that they're telling you to take.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I should tell you that, like, I had been, like, it was my my therapist at the time who said that, and I'd been working with her for a couple of years, and I had admitted that I was suicidal. So, I mean, she was kind of like legally, ethically obligated
For
to
sure.
make
Yeah.
sure that I was safe as could be. I'm not, still not entirely sure why she trusted me to, like, call my doctor and get on antidepressants, but um, so the ultimate thing was that I did start on antidepressants, and I felt the effects immediately.
Oh, wow.
It didn't take a few weeks to kick in. I was like, as soon as I started on one of these antidepressants, like, I felt so much more energetic and so much more focused and so much better. And
Hmm.
when I look back, I realized that I was also having things like pressured speech and stuff like that. But hindsight is 2020. It was only after I'd been on antidepressants for several years and switched medications, increased doses of medications, and so on and so forth, and they were all pooping out, as they used to say. So finally, I just said, this can't be something that's going to happen for the rest of my life. I'm not going to be able to function if I, like, have to change medications every few months. And so I went. In Maine, there are not very many psychiatrists, but fortunately, there was an ARNP, an advanced registered nurse practitioner, who specialized in psychiatry. I got an appointment with her and did the whole, like, 3-hour interview and stuff. And she was the one who ended up giving me the diagnosis of bipolar 2.
Wow.
And when I got on mood stabilizers, I was amazed at how things changed. I was like, is this how I'm supposed to feel? Like, fully in my body and grounded and, like, sort of organized? And
Wow.
Was that when you finally received that the diagnosis of bipolar 2? Was that a relieving experience for you where, sometimes when people are diagnosed, whether it's correct or not, it can be either a devastating or life altering, in not the most positive way. It can be kind of like a life altering experience. For you, was finally getting the validation, I guess, through appropriately and properly being diagnosed? Was that like a very relieving and opening experience?
yeah, it was actually a tremendous relief. I actually was looking at some journals from around the time when I was diagnosed, because I'm also working on a memoir, and part of that memoir is going to obviously feature my journey with bipolar 2 and the misdiagnosis and all these other things. But in the service of working on this memoir, I looked at one of my old journals at the time, and I realized that I had spent, like, the week before the visit with the ARNP looking all over the internet for reputable sites with good information about bipolar disorder, because somewhere along the line I was like, is this bipolar disorder?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it was kind of like, it was a validation and a relief, because I was like, well, maybe now that I have the right diagnosis, I can get the right treatment and I can be a functional adult.
Yeah, that's huge.
So, yeah.
It also, I think, reflects a lot of insight on your part, because a lot of people will resist a diagnosis, and maybe something like depression is more common than bipolar, so there's less stigma attached to it. So I think there are some people who might resist that diagnosis of bipolar, but and I'm not saying that it's been easy for you, but you did that research on your own. You became curious about it and were thinking like, is what I'm experiencing in my mind and in my body, is this bipolar? So I think that does reflect some insight on your part. So
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. I've always been kind of curious about physical and mental health, and I had a huge surgery when I was 12 years old, and my mother did a lot of advocating for me with doctors, and that's how I learned that it's possible to advocate for yourself and how to do it. And sometimes with my mother, it was kind of how not to do it because she would get a little aggressive about it sometimes. But
Sounds like a good East Coast mom.
yeah, the
Sounds like
lioness.
That sounds like that's
yeah.
I have a similar experience.
Yeah, she was from New York. She was from New York City, so of course she's
Nice.
got the city attitude.
Yeah, do not mess around with. My mom is from Connecticut originally, so yep. She's a mama bear. But that's amazing that one, you were taught from your mom like about advocation, because that is something that's missing, especially in the mental health world and especially really within the healthcare system. Like knowing that you can advocate for yourself, knowing that and how to do it and how to navigate that appropriately is really difficult. And I think the fact that you went out on that limb and you didn't just sit with this misdiagnosis of depression and continue taking antidepressant medications, which bolstered your hypomania. And that's like what Greg was saying, like a lot of times, especially with people with bipolar disorder, I don't mean to generalize it either, but like the tendency is, especially in manic states, it's really, really difficult to get people to accept, one, that yep, I have this disorder, and two, to take meds.
Yeah.
Because it's a feeling of euphoria. You can get shit done. You're busy. You're doing stuff. You have energy.
You feel like your best self, you know?
Yeah. So for you to have that insight and be like, this, how I'm feeling and what I'm doing in my behaviors is not who I am and want to be. Just bravo, like good on you. Like that's really, really impressive. And so going on that too, like before we move on to the animals real quick, just one thing that I was wondering about with your experience within like the mental health system and how you've navigated this, because it sounds like you've been doing this for a long time now, right? And having to deal with these different stigmas and different misdiagnoses. How did that like shape your view on mental health systems and mental care? And like, how did that like shake your validity or your confidence in providers' care for you? And then how have you like kind of adjusted for that, or like how have you come to terms with that?
Well, I would say that I've been pretty fortunate to largely have good providers, and I think that's kind of partly a measure of doing my research and knowing the kind of provider I'm looking for and also the kind of provider I'm not looking for. Like, for example, faith-based counseling would not work for me because I don't respond well to that, while it may work very well for someone else.
Right.
So just kind of knowing the types of counseling there are out there. I will say this, it is so much easier here in Seattle than it was in Maine. I mean, they're just, like I said earlier, providers are kind of like few and far between there. Like, I just kind of learned the importance of doing my research ahead of time and discerning what it is, that not only having a realistic assessment of what my needs are for counseling, or at least, as I am aware of them when I start counseling. So I've looked for people who would be helpful in that way, who would, like, for example, not be weirded out that I'm non-binary or queer, but who would still also hold me accountable for my behavior and like help me process the hard stuff.
Right.
I did have an inpatient behavioral health unit experience here in Seattle that was truly awful. I mean, it was like one flew over the cuckoo's nest, and it was a for-profit behavioral health facility located in a city near Seattle. It was just like It was totally understaffed. The food they gave us was like prison food quality. It was cold, like stale bread. I was like, what is this even? And there weren't workshops. Like, I'd been hospitalized previously in other places where they have people who come in and do workshops on things like DBT and cognitive behavioral therapy and kind of help us figure out the relationships we have in our life that are helpful and maybe not so helpful.
Like, do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah,
and
mental
health and
care.
like help people
Instead of house.
Yeah, and that's so unfortunate that you had that experience.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
The thing that bothered me the most, though, was that most of the people in this unit were homeless and or very low income.
Mm-hmm.
And what they did with these people is they just threw lithium at them and then let them sit around all day not doing anything because profits matter more than actual health care.
Wow. Yeah.
And these people had no idea of how to advocate for themselves or to even figure out like what they need, so that like if the social workers cared, they might actually be able to address these people's needs. And I was just so enraged by the way these people were being treated.
Yeah.
That's what really inspired me to start doing mental health advocacy, because I was like, nobody deserves to get treated like this. Just because you're homeless, just because you're poor, does not mean that you don't deserve appropriate care for your illness.
Good God, no. I mean,
That is powerful.
yeah. I couldn't agree more. I mean,
Yep.
we three talk about this all the time. We talk about this at the hospital. Like, so much of America is just plagued with that problem, that it's these very poorly staffed, not clean, just undersupplied, understaffed facilities where they're just warehousing people, sapping them of their insurance dollars, throwing bad food at them, over medicating them, and just having them sit around in front of the TV all day. I feel blessed that the three of us work at a place where we do a much better job than that. But that's rare. That's the exception, not the rule in America.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry that you had that experience, but I'm glad that it seems like you've processed it in a pretty healthy way, and that you've channeled the probably the indignation and the anger from that experience into something productive, which is advocacy. So again, bravo, like good on you for doing that.
Well, thank you.
Speaking on your advocacy and you having this experience within this hospital, within this inpatient facility, because your other side of what we're talking about today is what you found through companionship of animals and what you've done with advocation in mental health. Can you explain a little bit of that for us?
Well, I actually wrote an award-winning cat advice blog for 16 years. It's called Pause and Effect, and it will stay online as long as I can afford the hosting. And I also did a lot of writing for Catster, both the print magazine and the website. So I kind of got connected into the cat world through my writing. That kind of turned into volunteerism. But then at some point, it was when I met my cat Thomas that I realized I always knew I loved cats. But when I met Thomas, I realized just how important a cat can be. That cat saved my life. Like, I was planning to end my life the day I met him. Like, I was not going to be alive by midnight that night. But
That day.
Yeah, that day. And the editor at the newspaper where I was working at the time mentioned this cat at the local shelter, and I went over there on my lunch break to meet him, and he was so sweet. He was so sick. He had a really severe upper respiratory infection, so he had like eye discharge and snot all over his nose, and even with all of that, he purred at me. And I was like, this poor cat. Like, I kind of knew his backstory of being like his owner had to go to a nursing home, and I could see that he'd just been heartbroken by having to leave his first person. And it was like I looked at him, and it was like two broken souls looked at each other and kind of were like, I'll live if you will.
Wow.
And then, okay.
What a powerful moment.
That's so sweet.
Yeah.
And so, have you had any experience with pet therapy as like a treatment modality? Like, have you undergone like sort of formal pet therapy with a therapist or therapy dog?
No. I basically the way like I think of my cats as emotional support animals. So they're not like service animals, but they provide companionship, and they give me a reason to smile. They give me a reason to get out of bed when I'm feeling really depressed. And so just like having these two little beings in my life, that's a huge asset for me, because that is the single most protective factor against suicide for me, is that I have these cats who need me and who I care about and who I'd made a promise to that I would take care of them for the rest of their lives.
It's pure love.
Yeah. I mean, their love is unconditional. They don't care. Like, I mean, they don't care if you haven't had a shower in a week, you know? they, they just want love and petties.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's true that the kind of purity that you get the kind of purity of love that you get from an animal is really there's really nothing else like it. Like, they're so uncomplicated. Like, a dog will just look up at me like, just like nothing but just joy and love in their eyes. I don't know if you could see my face right now. It looks like we're frozen, but like I just kind of like tongue out, joyful eyes looking up at you. And like both of you have dogs. Like, you've both been with your dogs for years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had mine for 5.
5?
I got him when he was 8 weeks old. He's been with me ever since, and literally there's times I don't know. Yes, dogs love to smell. That's obvious. Everybody knows that. But Calvin literally smells flowers, like puts his nose in the buds and like gets in it. And there's times where I'm like just annoyed and I'm pissed off or something, and I'm walking Calvin. I'm not pissed at him. I'm like just upset, and I'm like just taking my dog for a walk to relax. And he just stops. Deadass will stop, back up when he gets a whiff of a good flower, and just go dig his face in it. And I'm like, this is like pure enjoyment of life. And like, my problems mean absolutely nothing, and I need to learn from you, because you have 0 F's to give right now with your nose just buried in that flower and loving life. And that's when I'm like, that's
a good point.
Dude, I'm good. Like, he reminds me to just be good with it, you know? He's my little Taoist, little being.
Yeah, I mean, I feel I went to go rescue a different dog that was, 4 years in age and like a potty train, all this stuff. And somebody was taking that dog home when I went to go meet him. And so they had just gotten a puppy in. And so they're like, oh, do you want to meet this puppy? Told me she was a spaniel mix, and I was like, well, I'm not going home with a puppy. But of course, met her, went home with her. It's been 8 years. Had a lot of hills and valleys in 8 years, and so I am all about having that animal life. Like you said, it's kind of, you not only is it that animal that depends on you, but unconditional love and is always there, and sometimes the reason for you to be there,
And the other thing is that, and it's the unconditional love. I mean, for me, the unconditional love I got from the cats and the dogs in my family was the only unconditional love I got.
Yeah.
And so I learned pretty early on that cats are honest and simple, and they love you, and it doesn't matter as long as you're kind to them. I mean, and just to feel loved back, like by an animal is, it's a pretty remarkable feeling.
It really is, and I have to agree with you with cats, because it's a little different. It is, because dogs, okay, and depending on the breed of the dog, it's just like, oh, you probably just love everybody.
Most
right?
dogs are just like,
you're just loving life. You're a goober. You just want some scratches. You're good to go. You're a homie. Cats, though, like, tell me right now, you don't go to a friend's house and when their cat, the first time their cat like comes over to you and just chills by you, and you're like, oh, I've been chosen.
They're a little bit more human-like.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I'm in the circle.
It's like some rare gift, like, oh, the cat has chosen.
And
me
when a
finally.
cat doesn't like you for whatever reason, you know.
Yeah. It's not passive.
Yeah, I volunteer at a cat shelter right now, and so I meet all kinds of cats all the time, and some of them are just complete mooshes and are just like, take me home. And I'm like, I can't. I have 2 cats and my apartment has a 2 pet limit. And then some of them are kind of like standoffish or fearful. And it takes them a while to adapt to life in a rescue.
But yeah, once you're in the circle, you're in the circle for life, and they'll just come up to you and be like, "Meow, like why don't you pay me?"
That's what I'm saying. Like the love you get from a cat, it's a little special because you're like, we're on the same page.
I earned
You're
this.
a homie. Yeah. It's the same. Like my cat is. I also have a cat too, and he's a homie. And I had. We got the cat. We got Echo before my dog, and he was I had some of my worst panic attacks with him, and he literally, like, depending on where I was at, he would first just sit on my chest, just wait, because he's a chunk, just naturally. He's
like
a big
weighted
cat.
blanket too.
Yeah, he's a big fuzzy cat, and I love him. And like, yeah, he would just sit and make sure I'm good and just watch me. And then when I'm like starting to relax, he'll lay all out on my chest and just start purring real heavy and just chill with me. And I never had a cat do that before then. And I went, you are my spirit homie.
That's a good buddy.
We are connected. And it's special. I think it's just special that you found that with cats, and that in that moment, in that like one single moment when you met this cat that necessarily was definitely not doing well, and you just had this moment of like a spiritual connection with a being that, yeah, it's just cool. It's just cool.
Yeah, I thanked him every day for saving my life. So he was a good cat. He lived to be almost 20.
And you kind of saved him too. That's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful story. JaneA, I've loved talking with you. This has been a great conversation. Is there anything you want to say, or anything that you want to add? Or are there any sort of like social media outlets that you want to plug for yourself before we go?
Yeah, well, I do have a website. It's the author website for my book, and it's still in progress because even though I work on websites and social media for my day job, it's like the bus driver who always has a broken down car, or the, but it's starting to get some content, and it will get more. And that's so my author website is JaneAKelley.com. And the cat advice blog is paws, PAWS dash and AND dash effect EFFECT.com.
Awesome.
Yeah, and basically, like, I'm on TikTok as JaneA Kelley, all one word run together. I've been doing some more sort of advocacy work and politicizing and things like that there.
All that will be in the show notes too.
Yeah.
We'll have all your tags and all your information there where anybody can look in the show notes.
But I do want to direct traffic there because especially your advocacy work about bipolar 2, that is a niche issue that I haven't really thought of. Like, how many people are walking around misdiagnosed, over-medicated, under-medicated, taking the wrong medications? It's definitely important work that you do. So thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for coming on to Unzip Mind with us. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. I've had a good time too.
Yeah, we appreciate you creating the space and coming on and sharing with us your story. And, honestly, like, I think there's a lot of really big takeaways for people. It's advocation and speak up for yourself and use your voices. And because you've done that, you have done some beautiful things and
empowers other people.
Yeah, and you're still here. So we appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you like what you hear, you can check out our website, unzipmind.com. You can listen on Buzzsprout, right? unzipmind.buzzsprout.com?
Yeah, or any listening platform.
Cool.
Search us up. Spotify.
We're on Spotify.
Apple.
We're on YouTube. Give us a share. Give us a shout out. Give JaneA a shout out. So again, JaneA, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. It's been great. So I'm looking forward to seeing how. I've been enjoying watching other episodes. So I'm of course, being a little self-centered, endlessly curious about how this one is going to end up looking. But
absolutely, and you are our first tele-style interview.
Yeah.
So thank you again for being part of that and part of that journey with us.
I'm glad we were finally able to make this happen after a long email communication stream, and I'm glad we were able to do this.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for listening. Thank you too for showing up as always. And
I thought we were done already.
We are done.
We are. And thank you, JaneA.
Thanks, guys.
bye, everybody.